Consuls General Ramon, von Berg, and Lassen. Ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed an honor for me as president of Ball State University and on behalf of the faculty and staff and students of Ball State to welcome you to our campus. We're pleased that you've chosen to help us inaugurate Europe Year on our campus by participating in this two-day symposium and teleconference. We're particularly pleased that our university could serve as the catalyst to bring together many of Indiana's most important business and professional leaders with officials representing the European community. We're pleased as well because as a public university, we believe Ball State has a responsibility to provide opportunities for people like you to meet and to help chart the future together. One of our goals as a university is to stretch the boundaries of our campus to embrace the world. We do that by sending hundreds of students and faculty each year to study abroad at places like Ball State's London Center, the Excel program, and the Vienna program. At the same time, we're bringing students and faculty, political, business, and social leaders from throughout the world here to study and to share their perspectives with us. The desire to stretch the campus is part of the reason that we'll spend this academic year focusing on the new Europe, just as 2 years ago we centered our attention on Canada. It's also part of the reason for bringing you here today. Our intention is to help stretch the psychological boundaries of Indiana business and industry to include the nations of Europe, to make Indiana one of the members of the European economic community, at least in the minds of Hoosier manufacturers and business executives. Despite the newspaper ink and television time devoted to the Pacific Rim and the natural inclination of Americans to look westward, I believe the cataclysmic events that have taken place and are now taking place and will continue to take place on the European continent will rivet our attention on that part of the world for some time to come. And rightly so, for Indiana's future, just as our past is tied to the nations of Europe. I wouldn't disagree that California ought to look to Japan, Korea, and China for its economic future. But Indiana was settled by the Germans, the Dutch, the English, the French, and other Europeans. That's where our roots are. That's where our traditions were born. That's where our values were forged, and I believe that's where our mutual prosperity is to be found also. The potential for growth and prosperity in Europe is fantastic, and as Europe prospers, so will the United States, and as the U.S. prospers, so will Indiana, and as Indiana prospers, so will her universities. In that sense, Ball State has a stake in the success of this gathering. It's part of our mission, but it's also part of our future as a place where new directions are forged and new ways of thinking are spawned. The issues you discuss here today, the contacts you make, the ideas you generate, that's why I'm so pleased that Ball State could serve as a facilitator and that you've chosen to participate in this important experiment. The results may not be known for months or years, but when it's over, who will introduce our speaker this morning. Promise Vanderhill.
Thank you very much, President Worthen. This is a particular pleasure for me to introduce someone who comes to Reuters. I take my Dutch ancestry very seriously. I want to add a warm word of welcome to all of you on this very special occasion. Dr. Martin Lindbergh and others who have worked tirelessly, and I probably put a capital T on that, for many, many months to anticipate with me the sessions, the ideas, and the people that this symposium will present to the Ball State community and the city of Muncie. It's my great personal privilege to chart the future together. On behalf of our entire university community, I welcome him to this campus and to our community, and his address this morning is entitled The Reshaping of the New Europe, Ambassador van Agt.
dear President, dear Provost, dear Consul General, dear everybody, good morning. 45 minutes, right?
Synchronized.
Q&A included. Okay, there we go. The Reshaping of Europe, 1992 and beyond. I think I need not give you a full explanation of how the process of European integration came into being. It started a couple of years only, almost immediately after World War II, and the basic drive towards integration at the time was to reconcile once and forever France and Germany, countries that had gone to war with one another 3 times in just over 1 century, and 2 of these wars had evolved into world wars, in both of which also the United States got involved. And to reconcile these arch enemies by bringing them together in a community of nations, together with fellow Europeans, for the sake of prosperity, of course, but for the sake of peace first. That was the basic drive, the beginning of the creation of the European community. That idealism has not subsided substantially, though I must add that in later decades, and in particular during the 80s, additional considerations came into play, more realpolitik, pragmatic considerations. In the 80s, when we had left behind us a time of sluggish growth, both in economic terms and in terms of and that is, if the West were to provide annually $20 billion to the Central and East European countries, and in addition $30 billion to the Soviet Union, that would be less than 10% of the OECD countries' annual expenditure for defense. Less than 10%. And it would be less than half of 1% of their combined GNP. So we talk an awful lot about the unbearable burden that is now lying on our shoulders, but let's be frank and honest in terms of our expenditures for defense, and in terms of percentages of our GNP, it is not really so much. Now we have a problem. I have to consult the provost. I saw a lot of young people marching out, and rightly so, because they know they have their classes at 10. Now it is 10 to 10 at the moment. What I had on my agenda was what I felt was a very interesting talk on the prospects for enlargement, so, the new architecture of Europe, and the relations with the United States in terms of trade and investment in particular. But that is just impossible to embark upon now. Shall we leave it here and go into a Q&A discussion? Would that not be the best procedure? It's up to you.
That'd be fine. Give some people in the audience a chance.
Yeah?
If they want to ask specifically about that, then we can have some questions and
Yeah.
focus on that. That'd be fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is what's called in German unvollendete.
You better translate that.
Yeah, and what is it? Uncompleted. What would you call that?
Unfinished symphony.
Unfinished symphony. An unfinished symphony. Yeah, unfinished symphony.
Yeah, Schubert.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, let me make that transition and thank all of you.
In vast amounts of money to the Soviet Union, of what remains of what was the Soviet Union, and the other countries. However, one naughty remark, if I may, if you would, you know that, if you would have the guts of introducing an increase in your energy taxes, only half of what the Germans have done to cope with the same kind of problems recently, only half of the increase, you would have no budget problem at all anymore. So I know the political problems attached to all of that. Oh yes, I know. But it is a given fact that to the Soviet Union and the rest of Eastern Europe, that is a gigantic sum for just one country, however wealthy and prosperous it might be. And others are doing quite well. The Japanese should be brought into this game. And that can they took from them in 1945. And of course an important thing is, it's not only, and that may have been implied in your question, it's not only a matter of bringing money in, it is equally important is market opening. Is market opening and enabling these countries to develop productions of a higher level and then export their products to our high purchasing power markets. In that respect, it is very regrettable what has happened in the negotiations between the European Community and Poland recently, when there was a row about a certain amount of meat that the European Community, driven by France, did not want to accept. Now, that's a black page in the history. I don't think so. I don't think so. No, I'm serious. If of course it is easier for me to say no than to say yes. But I'm honest. Nobody wants to mix up the various European cultures you find on the European continent and makes one European mixture, one European culture out of it. Nobody wants to do that, and it won't easily happen. Of course, much, not everything, but much hinges upon the language question. Are we going to have, that's part of the problem, I think a very important component of the problem. Are we going to have one European language? Certainly not. And we should not have. English, of course, is European community or no European community, is anyway marching on becoming the world language. Or it is already perhaps the world language. And that is an unstoppable development that will hit Europe as well as other continents, whatever we may do in terms of trying to preserve our own languages. So that is a development that is given. By the way, to interrupt myself, if these stupid Dutch in 1664 had not been so as to surrender New Amsterdam to the British. Yeah? we would have spoken Dutch here. Yeah, that would have been the world language. Now, okay.
Do you have anything like La Tribune or French
I'll make a note and I'll send you extensive information about that. I told you at this moment, not the extensive.
That'd be a little bit foolhardy, but it's just an absolutely incredible undertaking.
He sort of glossed over it pretty quickly.
I thought so too. I thought, oh yeah, we'll handle that too. I mean, and I'll,
Yeah, that's still the big there. It's open to tourism, I mean, in the summer. But it is very fantastic to see how they used to live. They're still living there. It's just
which goes along with a delicious Turkish wine. Or seafood fresh from the blue waters of the
There seemed to be, yes. They were, very happy with it. And
I've sold out.
She's our neighbor across the hill.
Well, that's good.